Well, hi, welcome to week 3. We're going to be covering chapter 7. Now, some of some of chapter 7 should have been covered already in the previous class, but I know some folks might not have uh, completed that type of thing. So I'm going to try to cover the first half of chapter 7 fairly quickly, and then we'll basically get really deep into the second half of chapter 7. We get into the array class. So, first thing I want to show you, just talk about, is what is an array. Well, I want you to think of an array as a bookshelf. Okay. So here we've got a bookshelf, and what we're going to do, we're going to declare this bookshelf as, let's just go ahead and call it an int. Okay. And that's it. So the only data we can put in here is an integer. Now the one thing we don't have are bookshelves. So we declare an array without any bookshelves. We don't know how many bookshelves we're going to need as of yet. We might know down the road, or we might know right up front. So let's say all of a sudden we know we're going to need 6 bookshelves. So I go ahead and I put in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 bookshelves. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 bookshelves. I'm not a very good drawer, so they should be equal. So what we have now done is we have said that we are giving this 6 elements. So I'm declaring this as a 6-element array. So now here's kind of the tricky thing with arrays. Is this first one we're going to call, now we're going to declare this as something. So let's call this students, or student number. Okay. So it's a student number and it's an array. So now what I do is, when I ever want to deal with whatever this bookshelf has, I will use the variable name. Okay, well, doing stuff I shouldn't be doing. So here I've got my student name, and then I use the number of the bookshelf. Now here's kind of the thing we have to realize, the numbering scheme. This first one's always going to be 0, then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So even though this is a 6-element array, I cannot use number 6 when I'm trying to retrieve something. And the way I would retrieve it is I would basically say student num, and that's basically how I would get to 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, the 5th bookshelf of my bookcase. Okay, so that's how elements or arrays are used, and that's kind of what the book kind of gets into there on page 409 and different things. So let's take a look at array demo number 1. So we open up array demo number 1, and if we look, array demo, so it's the name of the class. So we got our void main method. And then I've got final int employees number 3. So here's my constant. So I'm saying that I've got a constant variable called employees, and it's set to number 3. And then I come in here and I say int left square bracket, right square bracket. There's no numbers in there. Hours, and it's equal to a new int. So I'm using the int employee. So I'm instantiating this as a new int array. And how many elements are going to be in that array? How many bookshelves? Well, you notice I've got employees in there. That's 3. So this bookshelf's going to have 3 bookshelves. And each bookshelf's going to be numbered 0, 1, and 2. Remember, we cannot use the number 3. So I've got a scanner keyboard, and then I basically say print out, enter the number, and enter the hours worked by employees. That's 3 employees. So it's going to say enter the hours worked by 3 employees. So system out, I say employee number 1, hours 0, because this is the name of my array, hours 0 is equal to whatever we typed in. It's a next int. Hours 1, next int. Hours 2, next int. And then it basically says the hours you entered are Boom, 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 boom. So if we run this, it comes up and it says employees 1 will say 25, 26, and 27. And it goes through the loop and it says the hours you entered are 25, 26, and 27. Okay, so not too bad. So that's basically what an array is. It's just a simple array. Okay, if we take a quick look at array number 2, there you can see we've got the same array, we've got the same constant. This time, instead of going through one by one, we're using a for loop. So there I've got my index, it says as an int, and while we're basically less than employees, because remember I can't equal employees, that's number 3. If I equal employees, I'm going to blow up because I'm going to basically get basically outside the index array. So and then every time I go through the loop, I increase the index by 1. So the first time through, I basically am saying the same thing. Employee. Now here's kind of the strange thing. I want to number my employees 1, 2, and 3. Well, my index is going to be 0, 1, and 2. So you notice it says employee index plus 1. So the first time through it's 0. I'm going to say employee 1 is equal to their hours, okay? And then employee number 2 and employee number 3. So after I do that, then I say the hours you entered are, and here's employees, same exact for loop, and this time I'm just saying hours and the index. Okay, so I should get the same exact results. It should look identical to all this down here in the console. Okay, so if I run this, again, I'll say 25, 26, 27, and sure enough it basically same thing. So as we can see, a lot less code because we used a loop, and works just the same. So be aware, if you've got 3 elements, you basically will say less than that, how many ever you set it to. So if I set it to 3, you say while it's less than 3, basically go through your looping. If we take a look at the invalid subscript, here we've got int values equals new int 3. So here I've got a 3 element array, and I'm basically saying the number attempt to store 4 numbers. So I'm saying 4. Now what I think a better example would be this, where we would have less than or equal to 3. I think that's a better example. And again, that's going 0, 1, 2, 3. That's 4 elements. So if I run this, you're going to see that, boom, we get an invalid subscript. So it goes not processing element 0, 1, 2, 3, boom. When it hits that third one and tries to basically get to the element number 3, which is not the third element, it's the fourth, because there's 0, 1, 2, and 3, it basically says index out of bounds exception. Okay, so we basically have tried to go outside the boundaries of that. So what we can do, well, let's take a look at the pay array. That's probably a good one to start with. So if I open up that guy, and we'll see that we've got employees equal 5, so we've got a constant. We've got a 2 element, or I should say 2 variables. These are local variables, pay rate and gross pay. And then I've set my index, or I should say I've set my array hours to the number of employees, which happens to be 5. I've got my scanner keyboard. I'm saying enter the hours worked by the employees who all earn the same hourly pay rate. So in this particular case, we're going to assume that everybody makes the same amount per hour. So come in and I say employee number 1, and I'm going to go ahead and set the hours index equal to the number of hours they worked. Okay, so enter the number of hours, and then over here, so I'm going to loop through this thing the number of elements of the array, which happens to be make sure I'm less than employees. And then I go ahead and say, give me the hourly rate for all the employees, and then it will go ahead and do a calculation. So it will go ahead and go through that for loop again. This time it's going to say gross pay is equal to hours index. So the first bookshelf, it's going to grab those hours and multiply it times the gross pay, or I'm sorry, by the pay rate, and give us gross pay. Then it goes through and goes to the next bookshelf, grabs those hours, multiply it times pay rate, and gives us gross pay, and so on and so forth. So if we run this guy, it comes in and says, what's the hours worked by number 1? We'll say 25, 26, 27, 28, and 29. It says enter the hourly pay rate for each. We're going to go ahead and say $5. And voila, there we have 125, 130, 35, 40, 45. Okay. So, as you can see, an array really works great with loops. So yeah, so let me you can kind of go through some of these other ones. Now one thing we can do, I'm going to go back to the invalid subscript. And here's one thing I could do is here I could say if index is greater than the values dot length sys_o sys_o index is out is greater than the number of elements for this array. Okay. Okay, so why are sorry. I gotta do, so I'm gonna say index so else so this is kind of a nice way to check it. Now what is this is the name of the array, and it's got dot length. What is that? Well, the dot length tells us how many elements are in this array. So it's kind of a nice way to know how many elements you have. So this is kind of a nice way to make sure you double check you don't go outside and get that out of bounds exception. So if I save this and I go ahead and try to run it, and it runs, and so if index is greater than values.length, how about greater than or equal to? That's probably what I need. Let's try that. There we go. Yeah, that's what I needed. So index 3 is greater than the number of elements for this array, because 0, 1, 2, 3 is 4 elements as opposed to 0, 1, 2.